StarCraft 2 has changed a lot since its release in 2010. There were dozens of patches and a lot of balanced development. However, not every change was objectively a good one, and sometimes players found themselves fighting off really annoying strategies. Here are the worst 5 of them. The first one is 4 Warp Gate Rush. It was the most famous and annoying Protoss strategy in Wings of Liberty. A Protoss player just sits on one base, puts down 4 gateways and charges all his Nexus boosts into Cybernetics core for the upgrade. Then the goal is simple, you just put your reinforced pylon as close as you can and try to overwhelm your opponent. Sometimes people also sneak the pylon as a proxy, it was even deadlier then.
And it looks like Huck boldly actually going to go target fire this Overlord, now warping in. A Zealot has a lot of resources and is moving forward to do a lot of early damage. 3 more Zealots warping in.
And off come all the drones. 14 Lings are about to come out too. They all have speed, by the way. How good are these force fields?
Oh, does throw down some nice force fields, but he has not had any time to charge energy. And oh no! Trapping all the drones! Liquid Huck in a great position, now getting reinforcements from below, but the spine crawlers do finish Huck. May have to pull back and play defensively for now, but he's going to pick off these 2 Overlords perhaps. Huck is going to go for it. No, jukes back and forth, just going to pick off that Overlord, and he does get it. And oh, Stalkers join the fray.
Oh no, the hatchery is taking fire here. Only Lings in production now, no roaches have been started. Another spine crawler going down. Huck will most likely want to enforce with a couple more Zealots. A close encounter with these Lings. A counterattack was tried to be launched by Moon, but he realizes he has to turn around now, otherwise he's gonna lose this hatchery.
And it looks like he's trying to burrow the spine crawlers. It's not enough. Liquid Huck taking down. Oh, and it may trap the Queen. He does get it. Oh, 1 unit lost for Huck. He's lost only a single Zealot all game long.
While it doesn't sound like something nasty, this strategy was quite hard to counter in a PvP matchup unless you knew about it beforehand. Also, the speed of warpings on a single pylon was way faster than in Legacy of the Void. It was an effective way to play in the lower leagues against pretty much all 3 races. In PvP especially, there were no shield batteries or mothership core or even any kind of reliable early game scouting. You actually needed to get a special upgrade to use Sentry's hallucinations for scouting, and it just took too much time. Also, taking the natural expansion was a lot more risky, and all these things combined made 4-gate rush a very dangerous strategy. Another important point, you could actually warp into high ground from your lower ground pylons, making walls less effective against these strategies. Certain units like Roach or Queen had a shorter attack range and couldn't kite as efficiently as they do now. However, it was one of the few strategies that faded away almost naturally. 2 minor patches made it arrive later, and with time and experience most players learned how to play safely and counter that as best as they can. However, for most lower league players, this build order remained their worst nightmare for years. Next thing is mass Mutalisks. It's not a particular build order, but rather a certain playstyle that existed throughout all of StarCraft 2 history. The idea is simple, the Zerg player tries to hide his Spire as soon as he can, and then he builds only Mutalisks and sometimes extra Zerglings to tank in direct fights or just for run-bys. The goal is either to contain your opponent and constantly deal damage while getting a huge economy yourself, or simply going for the base trade. And the most annoying part about this strategy, it's a lot easier to use mutas than to counter them. In Wings of Liberty it was only viable in ZVP matchup, but it was a real pain in the ass for Protoss players. If you slightly miscalculate your defense and leave your base prematurely, you'll instantly lose in a base trade, but if you sit for too long, the game is lost too, because now Zerg is just too overpowered and rich.
You have 10 Phoenixes against 8 Corruptors, and Corruptors don't necessarily win, but they really just kind of tank a bit of damage, allowing the Mutas to escape, and if the Phoenixes don't get microed well, maybe the Mutas and Corruptors together can take out some Phoenixes. As we see this army once again rotating towards the 3rd base. I thought they were going to go into the main. The 3rd base it is. Corruptors actually peeing on this Nexus. I don't think that is the correct call. These Phoenixes with +1 are dealing a lot of damage as there are no Carapace upgrades whatsoever on these area units. We do have Carapace level 2 on ground coming in right now. There are 12 gases mining. We have Spines on the way. We have a Spore coming down. It feels like Ratata, despite still focusing on this harass, is already mentally in a late game right now. Like, he's making the transition. He's getting the adrenal glands. He's getting the Ultra Cavern. Vipers. Oh, I love this actually. I wouldn't mind if he doesn't throw away all of these air units and just starts using
The best counters were Phoenix hits with range upgrade, but Zerg players learned to add Corruptors and take Protoss players by surprise. However, this strategy wasn't as popular in Wings of Liberty. There were more powerful things such as Infestors and Broodlords. But already in Heart of the Swarm, Mutalisks were buffed, and now they were faster and they could also regenerate HP at a quick rate. Even if they were injured, it took less than a minute to restore HP and attack again. This way, Mutas became even more viable and annoying. And Zerg players also learned to build proxy spires to make them even more sudden. And apart from ZVP, Mutas got much better in other matchups too. In ZVZ, Infestors no longer had instant fungal ability, and now it was a projectile that Mutas could easily evade, and Hydralisks were just laughable. There was also no parasitic bomb or lurkers, and fighting with Muta Linkbane was almost impossible, unless you land perfect fungals all the time. This is why most ZVZ games were Muta-based only, and the developers even had to buff Spores at one point to deal more damage to biological units. As for ZVT, they were the backbone of Zerg army against Bio, but as for mech players, you could still win with mass Mutas and constant pressure, but it was a lot harder to use that against Terrans overall. While Mutas were never nerfed since that strategy still requires some skill and element of surprise, they became less significant in Legacy of the Void. Every race got new tools to deal with them. This includes Mothership Core and then Shield Batteries, and Zerg Vipers now have a parasitic bomb that just annihilates Muta stacks. Also, the economy system has changed, scouting is easier and it's just harder to play them, but that's still one of the most annoying Zerg strategies. One of the core problems of the Zerg race was that it's just really hard to put pressure on your opponents, especially on Protoss race in the early game. To deal with that, developers allowed Zerg players to build drop overlords if they had an evolution chamber. And guess what? Zerg players did exactly that. And they did that too often too. Now in ZVP, Zerg players would go for link cheeses or banelink busts a lot more often, as it would work even on high levels. It was just really difficult to hold in two places at the same time in the early game. Even the Mothership Core or Shield Batteries didn't provide enough defense sometimes.
Mixing it up with these various attacks, and it looks like there is actually a small opening to try to come in here with these Zerglings, so the maneuver from Scarlet did seem to pay off, and now we have to see how many more pros will be taken out. We're already up to 4.
All right, a shield battery even being made, so SOS is not taking this lightly whatsoever. Going down, dropping more Zerglings into the main base. Zerglings also attacking here at the wall-in once again.
Very awesome play here by Scarlet, hitting so many different fronts at once. The Zerglings now looping back around, and I think that in fact the entrance of SOS's base may be broken open here, and that would mean no gateway for the time being.
If she can take down this gateway, that is huge. It goes down, and that means that this adept should be picked off as well. More Zerglings dropped off into the main base. GG!
While this strategy pretty much didn't work in other matchups, it created a poor balance in ZVP. Even if you didn't attack your Protoss opponent, it was easy to fake the cheese, and most Protoss players had to act more passive and reserved, investing more money and time into extra units or other means of defense. Eventually, the devs changed that, and now you need a layer to build drop overlords, which pretty much killed that strategy completely. There is one problem with siege tanks: you cannot escape if you take a bad fight. It takes too much time to unsiege and evacuate. With the introduction of Widow Mines, tanks fell from grace because of that, and also their higher price, especially in ZVT matchup. Mines were just overall more effective, and there was less incentive to build tanks. To fix that issue, Blizzard came up with probably the craziest idea that ever existed. Now medevacs could pick up tanks in the siege mode and drop them back in that configuration too. In theory, it would allow Terran players to quickly retreat and save their forces, but in practice, it became a lethal weapon to all races.
But he's got to be careful. He's right on the edge of that creep. Looks like the Lings and Banelings are coming down here now. The Queens will come in to try to target down the medevacs. It looks like Beyond is overextended as Dark is gobbling up the forces of Beyond.
Oh, but the targeting on those Banelings is amazing. Every Baneling goes down.
Now you could use them as harass tools and just drop around the mineral line, or you could create non-stop pushes that would never end unless you got the tanks, which, as you guess, was a lot harder to do now. While it seemed like a really funny mechanic for Terran players, it was kinda annoying for other races. The price of a Terran's mistake decreased, and now the tanks got more viable than even Widow Mines. However, this meta wasn't as scary on the low level, as you still needed a lot of micro to pick up and drop tanks, but on the high level many professional Terrans dominated with this combination, and Beyond was one of them. So this whole thing was just frustrating to play against, and Blizzard got a lot of complaints on the topic. First time they tried to adjust its power and made a delay after drop, but that didn't really solve the issue. If they simply removed the ability, tanks would once again become less useful. So there was another solution. Blizzard redesigned tanks and made them significantly stronger, but with a lot less mobility than before. Many people suggest that perhaps tanks should just get unsieged in the medevac, but for some reason Blizzard discarded that option completely. Cannon Rush is the single most hated thing in the StarCraft 2 community. It existed since the first days of the game and made many people rage and break their keyboards. But with Wings of Liberty it was a very niche strategy. You could only execute that on certain maps, and you needed to do that with stealth. With years passing by, this build order was getting stronger and even more evil, as people learned new ways to execute that. At one point, Blizzard even had to add destructible plates around the natural ramp to avoid players blocking the Zerg race on the main base with pylons, and also bunkers in ZVT. And it seemed like the Cannon Rush is done. Yes, it was used, but it was kinda rare to be honest. But the Pandora box was once again opened with the introduction of shield batteries. Now Protoss players could fortify their cannon positions with constant regeneration, and they added a totally new element to cannon rushing. That's Immortal War Prism Micro.
Look at this. The Immortal's just kind of kiting back, Solar with his last hurrah. He has that hatchery making in the top right, but I mean he hasn't even killed a single Immortal this game.
Yeah, the Immortals were kept alive, and the damage just began to snowball here. Again, those Lings, when they got inside the main, it was pretty remarkable. But at the end of the day, it was not enough to slow down the damage that Parting put out here. Parting with two extremely, epically cheesy wins is going to move on.
The idea behind the build order is simple. You create a fortified position around your opponent's natural and try to out-micro him with your Immortals and the War Prism. You are unlikely to lose them because of the sheer amount of regeneration from shield batteries, and you just slowly chip away at your opponent until he surrenders or until you have enough forces. It was especially annoying for Zerg players, and a lot of Protoss cheesers included that build order in their strategy pool. It also worked against certain Protoss races, and it was the first time when you could achieve Grandmaster with one single cannon rush for all matchups. The strategy was really annoying for a great number of reasons, and even though it was enjoyable to watch, it was also incredibly annoying to play against. Blizzard tried to nerf that with different changes, but the strategy is still relevant up to this day. With the new battery changes it got considerably weaker, but it's somewhat viable and can be used at any level, providing you have some level of microcontrol skills. This strategy also has different variations, including the one with Void Race. And that's it for our top 5. I didn't cover the two most annoying Zerg late game metas, but you can check out separate videos on them here. These topics are just too big to fit into that list and I decided to make separate stuff on that. So, what do you hate playing against in StarCraft 2? Write your opinion in the comments, and as usual, have a nice day and see you next time.